If you look at me like that again, I'm going to ruin you right here in this empty diner. That was the first time Amara realized her favorite polite customer was not a gentle businessman but the most feared Mafia don in the city. And he'd been coming every Thursday night for one reason. Her. Amara Johnson knew what tired felt like. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that settled into your bones after too many double shifts and bills that never stopped coming. She was 26 years old, and spent most of her nights at a small diner on 14th and Willow, wiping down tables that would just get dirty again and pouring coffee for people who barely looked at her face. She had dreams once. Big ones. She wanted to be a nurse, wanted to wear scrubs instead of this faded uniform with the name tag that kept falling off. She wanted to help people, really help them, not just bring them plates of eggs and toast. But nursing school cost money she didn't have, and every time she saved up a little bit, something always came along to take it away. The rent would go up, the car would break down. Life had a way of reminding her that dreams were expensive things. So she wiped tables and smiled at strangers and told herself that someday, maybe someday, things would be different. Then he started coming in. It happened on a Thursday night, almost midnight, when the diner was mostly empty and the world outside felt quiet and dark. The bell above the door made its little chiming sound and she looked up from the counter she was cleaning. That was when she saw him for the first time. He was tall. The kind of tall that made him have to duck just a little when he walked through the doorway. His suit looked like it cost more money than she made in 3 months. It was dark and perfectly fitted. The kind of thing people wore in movies about fancy businessmen. His watch caught the light when he moved his hand, all silver and gleaming, and she found herself wondering what kind of person wore a watch like that to a diner at midnight. But it was his face that made her pause. He was Asian, with black hair styled neat and perfect, and dark eyes that seemed to notice everything. Not in a creepy way. In a careful way, like he was the kind of person who paid attention. He sat down at the counter, right in front of where she was standing, and when he looked up at her, his expression was calm and polite. She grabbed a menu and walked over, putting on her customer service smile, the one she used 100 times a night. He ordered black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just black. His voice was smooth and quiet, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. When she brought the cup over and set it down in front of him, he said thank you and used her name. Amara. He must have read it on her crooked name tag. But something about the way he said it made her feel seen. Really seen. Not just as the waitress, but as a person. She told herself not to read into it. Rich people were polite sometimes. It didn't mean anything. But then he came back. The next Thursday, at exactly the same time, 11:47 at night. He ordered the same thing, black coffee, and he sat in the same spot at the counter. This time when she brought his cup over, he asked her how her week had been. Not in a fake way. In a way that made it seem like he actually wanted to know. She said it was fine. The usual answer. But he kept looking at her with those dark, careful eyes until she found herself telling him the truth. That her car had made a weird noise that morning and she was worried about how much it would cost to fix. That her feet hurt from standing all day, that she was tired. He listened. Really listened. Then he paid for his coffee, left her a tip that was way too much, and said goodnight. After that, it became a pattern. Every single Thursday, 11:47 at night, Mr. Liang walked through the door of that diner and sat down at the counter. He always wore a suit, always ordered black coffee, and always stayed for exactly 1 hour. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't, but he was there, steady as clockwork, like the one reliable thing in her chaotic life. He started noticing things about her, small things that most people never saw. The week she cut her hair shorter, he mentioned that it looked nice. When she stopped wearing her favorite hoop earrings because one of them broke, he asked if everything was okay. The nights when she couldn't quite manage a real smile, he seemed to know without her having to say anything. And the tips, they were always big. $50, $75, sometimes $100, for a $10 cup of coffee. She tried to give the money back at first, told him it was too much, but he just shook his head and said she deserved it. That good service should be rewarded. She stopped arguing after a while and started putting that money in a jar labeled nursing school. It was filling up slowly but surely, and every time she added one of his bills to it, she thought about him. Mr. Liang, the kind businessman who came in every Thursday and made her feel like she mattered. She told herself it was just a harmless crush. The kind of thing that didn't mean anything. He was rich and successful, and probably had a whole life she knew nothing about. She was a waitress with broken dreams and tired feet. People like him didn't really see people like her. Not in that way. But sometimes, when he looked at her across the counter, she wondered. Sometimes his eyes lingered just a little too long. Sometimes when she handed him his coffee, their fingers would brush and he wouldn't pull away immediately. Sometimes she caught him watching her move around the diner. His expression unreadable but intense. She started looking forward to Thursdays. Started wearing her good lipstick on Thursday nights, even though she told herself it didn't matter. Started making sure her hair looked nice and her uniform was clean. She counted down the days until 11:47. Until that bell would chime and he would walk through the door and make her feel like the center of someone's universe for one single hour. It was silly. She knew it was silly. But in a life that felt heavy and hard most of the time, Mr. Liang and his Thursday night visits were something bright to hold on to. She didn't know his first name, didn't know where he lived or what he did for a living or if he had a family. All she knew was that he was kind and generous, and that when he said her name, it sounded different than when anyone else said it. She didn't know that everything she thought she knew about him was wrong. She didn't know that the man in the expensive suit who asked about her day and left $100 tips was hiding something big, something dangerous. She didn't know that he wasn't coming for the coffee at all. He was coming for her. And on one rainy Thursday night, with the diner almost empty and the world quiet outside, she was finally going to find out the truth. Before we go any further, pause for a second. If you love dark, emotional mafia romances like this, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications. That's the only way YouTube keeps showing you these stories, and there's no way you want to miss what happens next between Amara and Kai. The rain started just after 11 that Thursday night. Not the gentle kind that whispered against the windows, but the heavy kind that drummed on the roof and made the whole world feel smaller and closer. The diner was almost empty, just one old man nursing a piece of pie in the corner booth, and Manny the cook who had already clocked out early and gone home. That meant it was just Amara and the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of rain turning everything outside into a blur. She was wiping down the counter for the third time. Not because it was dirty, but because her hands needed something to do. Because her heart was beating a little faster than normal. Because it was 11:47 and she knew, she just knew, that any second now the bell would chime and he would walk in. And he did. The door opened and Mr. Liang stepped inside, rain darkening the shoulders of his expensive coat. He shook the water from his hair with one hand, and when he looked up and found her standing there, something in his expression made her breath catch. He looked different tonight. Tired maybe. Or tense. Like whatever walls he usually kept up were starting to crack. He sat down in his usual spot and she poured his coffee without him having to ask. Black, no sugar, just the way he liked it. Her hand was steady when she set the cup down in front of him, but her pulse was racing and she didn't understand why. Thank you, Amara. His voice was quieter than usual. Softer. Like he was carrying something heavy inside him and the weight of it was pressing down on every word. She should have walked away. Should have gone back to wiping tables or counting the register or doing any of the 100 small tasks that filled her nights. But she didn't. She stayed right there on the other side of the counter. Close enough that she could see the rain still caught in his hair. Close enough that she could smell whatever expensive cologne he wore. Long night? She asked, trying to sound normal. Trying to ignore the way her stomach was fluttering. You have no idea. He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup like he was trying to warm himself. And when he looked up at her, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. Sadder somehow. She wanted to ask what was wrong. Wanted to reach across the counter and touch his hand the way she had that one time months ago when she thought he'd burned himself. Wanted to do something. Anything. To take away whatever pain was sitting behind those careful eyes. But she didn't know if she was allowed to care that much. Didn't know if a waitress was supposed to worry about a customer like he was something more. So instead she just stood there and looked at him. Really looked at him. Not with her customer service face or her polite smile. Just her. Just Amara. Looking at a man who made her feel things she had no business feeling. And he looked back. The moment stretched out between them. Long and electric and dangerous. The rain kept drumming on the roof. The old man in the corner booth turned a page in his newspaper. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. But none of it mattered because all Amara could see was him. All she could feel was the way her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the coffee cup a little harder. And then he said something that shattered the careful distance they'd been keeping for 6 months. "If you look at me like that again." His voice dropped so low she almost didn't hear it over the rain. "I'll bend you over this counter and show you exactly what happens to waitresses who tease men like me." The words hit her like a physical thing. Heat flooded her face, her chest, her entire body. The coffee pot she'd been holding suddenly felt too heavy, and she set it down with shaking hands because she couldn't trust herself to keep holding it. "Excuse me?" The words came out as barely a whisper. She wasn't even sure she'd said them out loud. But he heard. He always heard her. "You heard me, Amara." He said her name like it was something precious, something breakable. His eyes never left hers, and there was something in them now that hadn't been there before. Something raw and hungry and barely controlled. "You've been looking at me like that for months. Like you want something you shouldn't want. Like you're imagining things a good girl like you has no business imagining." Her breath stopped in her throat. This couldn't be happening. This kind, polite businessman who asked about her day and left generous tips couldn't be saying these things, couldn't be looking at her like he wanted to consume her whole. But he was. "Mr. Liang. I think you should." She tried to step back, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Tried to put professional distance back between them, but it was too late. The barrier was gone. The safety was gone. Everything had changed in the space of one look, one sentence, one moment of honesty. "Stop." He held up one hand and she froze, caught in the gravity of whatever was happening between them. "Stop calling me that. Stop pretending you don't feel this too." Feel what? But she knew. God help her. She knew exactly what he meant. This. He gestured between them, a small movement that somehow contained everything. "Whatever this has been for the last 6 months. You think I come here for coffee? You think I drive across town every Thursday night because I like the atmosphere? Then why?" Her voice broke on the question. "Why do you come here?" Something shifted in his expression. The careful control cracked a little more, and underneath it, she saw something that made her heart squeeze painfully in her chest. Loneliness. Longing. Want so deep it looked like it hurt. "Because you're the only real thing in my life." His words were quiet, but they hit her like thunder. "Because every Thursday at 11:47 I get to sit across from you and pretend for 1 hour that I'm just a man and you're just a woman and there's nothing complicated between us. Nothing dangerous. Nothing impossible." Tears burned behind her eyes, and she didn't know why. Didn't know why his pain felt like her pain. Didn't know why the idea of him being lonely made her chest ache. "But I ruined it, didn't I?" He gave her a sad smile. "Because I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Because you looked at me tonight with those beautiful eyes, and I finally couldn't take it." She should have been scared. Should have been offended or angry or any of the things a woman was supposed to feel when a man said something that bold, that raw, that completely inappropriate. But all she felt was seen. For the first time in her entire life, someone had looked at her and wanted her. Not just wanted her body, but wanted her. All the tired parts and the broken dreams, and the pieces she tried to hide. He saw them all and he still wanted her anyway. "I don't understand," she whispered. Her hands were gripping the counter now because it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I don't understand what's happening." "Neither do I." He stood up slowly, carefully, like he was afraid sudden movement might spook her. "All I know is that I've been holding myself back for 6 months. Being polite, being respectful, being the kind of man you could feel safe with. But tonight when you looked at me like that, like maybe you felt even a fraction of what I feel, I couldn't do it anymore." The rain outside got louder. Or maybe it was her heartbeat. She couldn't tell anymore. "What do you feel?" She needed to hear him say it. Needed the words even though part of her was terrified of them. He moved closer to the counter. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough that if she leaned forward just a little, their hands would touch. Everything. His voice was rough now, scraped raw with emotion. "I feel everything when I look at you, Amara. And it's destroying me." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and enormous and impossible to take back. And Amara realized with a shock that cut through her like lightning that she felt it too. Had been feeling it for months without admitting it. The butterflies every Thursday. The way she dressed up for him. The way his tips sat in a jar with a label that represented her dreams. The way she thought about him on the days he wasn't there. This wasn't just a harmless crush anymore. This was something bigger. Something terrifying. Something that was going to change everything whether she was ready for it or not. And standing there in that almost empty diner with rain pounding on the roof and her heart pounding even harder, she had a choice to make: walk away and lose this feeling forever, or step forward into something that felt dangerous and impossible and more real than anything she'd ever known. Her hands were shaking and she couldn't make them stop. The air between them felt thick and charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. She needed to say something, needed to break this tension before it swallowed them both whole, but her mouth wouldn't cooperate. Then he reached into his jacket. The movement was casual, practiced, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. He pulled out something small and black and set it down on the counter between them with a soft click that sounded too loud in the quiet diner. It was a card. Not a business card with phone numbers and email addresses. Just a sleek black rectangle with something embossed on it in gold. A symbol that made her blood run cold the moment she recognized it. A dragon coiled around a lotus flower. She'd seen that symbol before. On the news. In whispered conversations between customers who didn't know she was listening. In warning looks her mother used to give her when they drove through certain neighborhoods late at night. Her eyes shot up to his face, and suddenly everything about him looked different. The expensive suits weren't just wealth. They were armor. The careful way he watched everything wasn't politeness. It was surveillance. The calm in his voice wasn't gentleness, it was control. Her voice came out strangled. That's the Kai Liang. He said it like he was bored. Like revealing he was one of the most feared men in the entire city was just another Thursday night conversation. Not Mr. Liang. Not the nice businessman who asks about your car problems and pretends to care about your dreams. Just Kai. The name hit her like a slap. Everyone knew that name. Everyone with any sense feared that name. Kai Liang ran half the crime in the city. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets. Things people only whispered about in dark corners. He wasn't just connected to dangerous people. He was the dangerous people. The newspapers called him the Dragon. Said he was ruthless and cold and that people who crossed him had a habit of disappearing. And he'd been sitting in her diner for 6 months. Drinking coffee. Asking about her day. Making her feel special. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make her brain accept what her eyes were seeing. A criminal? He tilted his head. And there was something cruel in his smile now. Something that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there and she'd just been too stupid to see it. Yes, Amara. I'm a very bad man who does very bad things. Does that scare you? It should have. God. It should have terrified her. But underneath the fear was something else. Something that felt like betrayal, like her heart was breaking into sharp little pieces. You've been lying to me. The words came out small and hurt. For 6 months. Everything you said, everything you did, it was all a lie. His expression hardened and suddenly the kind man she thought she knew was gone completely. In his place was someone cold and sharp and dangerous. Don't be naive. It doesn't suit you. He picked up his coffee cup and took a slow sip, watching her over the rim with eyes that gave nothing away. Did you really think a man like me comes to a dump like this for the food? That I drive across town every Thursday because I enjoy the ambiance? The casual cruelty in his voice made her flinch. Then why? She hated how weak she sounded. Hated the tears burning in her eyes. Why did you come here? Why did you talk to me? Why did you make me think? What? That I cared? He set the cup down with a sharp click. That you mattered? Maybe I did, Amara. Or maybe I was just bored and you were entertaining. A sweet little waitress with big dreams and a trusting smile. So easy to impress with money and attention. Stop. She stepped back from the counter, wrapping her arms around herself like she could hold the broken pieces together. Just stop. But he didn't stop. He stood up, tall and imposing. And there was nothing gentle about him anymore. Nothing safe. You want the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. He leaned across the counter and she could see something fierce and frightening burning in his eyes. I am Kai Liang. I hurt people for a living. I've done things that would give you nightmares. I've built an empire on fear and blood and I don't lose sleep over it. She wanted to run. Wanted to grab her purse and run out into the rain and never look back. But her feet wouldn't move. And I came here every Thursday. He continued, his voice dropping lower, more intense. Because the first time I walked through that door you looked at me like I was human. Not like I was someone to fear or use or manipulate. Just human. The shift in his tone confused her. 1 second he was cruel and mocking. The next he sounded almost vulnerable. Do you know how rare that is in my world? He straightened up, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Everyone wants something from me. Power, protection, money, favors. They smile to my face and plot behind my back. They're terrified of me or they're trying to kill me, and there's nothing in between. Then you. His eyes locked on hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. You with your crooked name tag and your tired smile, and your genuine kindness. You held my hand that second week because you thought I'd burned myself on coffee. Do you remember that? She did. She remembered the way he'd looked shocked when she'd grabbed his hand without thinking. Remembered how warm his skin had been. You didn't know who I was. Didn't want anything except to make sure I was okay. And he paused, his jaw tightening like the next words physically hurt to say. I became addicted to that feeling, to being seen as just a man instead of a monster. You lied to me, she repeated. But her voice was weaker now. Confused. Yes. He didn't deny it, didn't make excuses. I lied about my name. I lied about my work. I lied about why I kept coming back. But I never lied about this. He gestured between them. That same small movement that somehow contained everything. I never lied about wanting you. About thinking about you every day between Thursdays. About sitting in that booth, fantasizing about what it would be like to actually have you instead of just watching you pour coffee for other people who don't appreciate what they're looking at. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. The intensity should have sent her running. But all she could think about was the past 6 months. All those Thursdays. All those conversations. All those moments she'd thought were real. Were any of them real? She asked quietly. Or was I just some game to you? Some way to feel human for an hour a week? Something flickered across his face. Anger maybe. Or hurt. You think this is a game? His voice was hard now, all sharp edges and barely controlled fury. You think I waste my time on games? I run an empire. Amara. I have 100 things demanding my attention every single second of every single day. People trying to kill me. Deals to negotiate. Territory to protect. Money to move. Power to maintain. Then why, she challenged, finding some courage she didn't know she had. Why waste your Thursdays on me? Because you're the only goddamn thing in my life that isn't about power or fear or strategy. The words exploded out of him and she jumped at the sudden volume. At the raw emotion underneath. Because for 1 hour a week I get to sit in this mediocre diner and talk to a woman who makes me feel like I'm something other than the dragon. Like I'm just Kai. Just a man who drinks too much coffee and tips too much money and wants something he can't have. Why can't you have it? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His laugh was bitter and sharp. Because I'm a monster. Amara. Because I've killed people. Because my hands are stained with blood that won't ever wash clean. Because dragging you into my world would destroy everything good and pure about you. Because you deserve someone safe and normal who can give you a simple life. And I am the furthest thing from safe and normal that exists. But you want me anyway, she said slowly, trying to understand. Even though you shouldn't. Even though it would destroy me. You still want me. Yes. The confession came out rough and raw. God help me, yes. I want you so badly it's eating me alive. I've wanted you since that first night. Since you smiled at me and asked if I wanted cream with my coffee like I was just another customer instead of someone people cross the street to avoid. The rain pounded harder against the windows. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and Amara stood there trying to process the fact that the kind man she'd been falling for was actually a ruthless criminal who'd been obsessed with her for 6 months. I should call the police, she whispered. You should. He didn't look worried. Didn't look concerned at all. But you won't. How do you know? Because you're still standing here. His smile was dark and knowing and made heat pool in her stomach despite everything. Because you haven't run screaming. Because underneath that fear I can see in your eyes, there's something else. Something you don't want to admit. What? Curiosity. He leaned forward again, close enough that she could feel his breath. Excitement. That little thrill you get from dangerous things. You feel it, don't you? That pull. That electricity. You're terrified of me and drawn to me at the same time. You're insane, she breathed. Probably. But so are you for still being here. And the worst part, the part that made her hate herself a little, was that he was right. She should have run. Should have called for help. Should have done anything except stand there feeling her heart race with something that wasn't entirely fear. Because part of her, some dark reckless part she didn't know existed, wanted to know what would happen if she stayed. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Amara's mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the kind customer with the ruthless criminal, trying to understand how both could exist in the same person. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips, in every nerve ending that was screaming at her to make a decision. Run or stay. Fear or trust. Safety or truth. Kai straightened up slowly, pulling back from the counter, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its sharp edges. What was left behind sounded tired and honest, and achingly human. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. He wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on the coffee cup in front of him, on his own hands wrapped around the ceramic like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. And then you're going to make a choice. The only choice that matters. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Just stood there trembling and waiting. My mother died when I was 15. His words were quiet, almost lost beneath the sound of the rain. Cancer. It took 2 years, and by the end she didn't even recognize me anymore. My father had already been dead for 3 years before that, killed by a rival family who wanted to send a message. Amara's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected him to share something so personal, so painful. I was alone after that. 15 years old with nothing except my father's reputation and his enemies. I learned fast that the world doesn't care about orphan boys. It only cares about power, about fear, about who's willing to do whatever it takes to survive. He looked up at her then, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her throat close up. So I became what I needed to be. Cold. Calculating. Ruthless. I built walls so high that nothing could touch me. I turned myself into someone people feared, because fear was the only thing that kept me alive. And it worked. I survived. I built an empire. I became untouchable. But, she whispered, because she could hear it coming. But somewhere along the way I forgot what it felt like to be human. His voice cracked just slightly. I forgot that there was anything in the world except power and strategy and violence. I had money, control, respect, everything I'd fought for. And I was empty. He stood up, moving around the counter before she could process what he was doing. Suddenly he was on her side, in her space, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. She should have stepped away, but her body wouldn't listen. Then 6 months ago, I walked into this diner because one of my businesses is 3 blocks away and I needed coffee. And you were here. She remembered that night. Remembered thinking he looked too expensive for this place. Remembered the way he'd said thank you like he meant it. You smiled at me. Not the fake smile you use for difficult customers. A real one. And you asked if I'd had a long day. And for some reason I told you the truth. I said yes. And you said you understood. That some days felt endless. It was such a small thing. Such a nothing moment. But she remembered it too. And then the second week, his hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed against her cheek so gently, it made her heart ache. You thought I'd burned my hand on the coffee. You grabbed my hand without thinking. Checked my skin. Fussed over me like I mattered. Like I was someone worth caring about instead of someone to fear. I didn't know who you were, she said quietly. Exactly. His thumb traced along her jaw, and she couldn't help the way she leaned into the touch. You didn't know and you didn't care. You just saw a person who might be hurt and your instinct was to help. Do you have any idea how that felt? To be treated like I was worth kindness with no agenda behind it? Tears were building behind her eyes again. She blinked them back. I started coming back for that feeling. For those few minutes where I could be just a man and you could be just a woman and there was nothing complicated between us. Where you'd tell me about your bad days and your dreams and your worries about money and I could listen and feel like maybe I wasn't completely broken inside. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her like she was something precious. You became my addiction, Amara. My one real thing in a world full of lies and manipulation and violence. Every Thursday, I'd count down the hours until I could see you. Until I could sit across from you and pretend for 1 hour that I was someone who deserved softness. Someone who could have something good. Why didn't you tell me? The words came out choked. Why lie for 6 months? Because I was a coward. The admission seemed to cost him something. Because I knew that the moment you learned who I really was, you'd look at me differently. You'd see the monster instead of the man. And I couldn't bear to lose the way you looked at me. Like I was someone worth smiling at. A tear escaped down her cheek and he caught it with his thumb. But I can't keep lying anymore. Not to you. Not to myself. So here's the truth. All of it. No more hiding. His voice dropped lower, raw with emotion. I am Kai Liang. I am a criminal and a killer. I have done terrible things and I will probably do more terrible things before I die. My world is dark and violent and there is no redemption waiting for me at the end. She started to pull away, but his hands tightened gently on her face, keeping her there. But when I'm with you, I remember what it felt like to be human. When you smile at me, I feel like maybe there's still something in me worth saving. When you laugh at my stupid jokes, or tell me about your day, or look at me with those beautiful eyes, I feel like I'm not completely lost. Kai. His name felt strange on her tongue. Real and dangerous and intimate. I love you. The words hit her like a physical blow. I've been in love with you for months, and it's destroying me because I know I can't have you. I know I shouldn't even want you, but I do. God help me. I want you more than I've ever wanted anything. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible and terrifying. So here's my offer. His eyes searched hers desperately. One night, one honest night, where we stop pretending, and stop lying, and just admit what this is. What we've been dancing around for 6 months. What is this? She whispered. You know what it is. His forehead came to rest against hers. You've known for a while now. You've been falling just as hard as I have. The only difference is you're brave enough to admit you're scared. I am scared. Tears were flowing freely now, and she didn't try to stop them. You're a criminal. You've killed people. You could destroy my entire life. I could. He didn't deny it. And if you tell me to leave right now, I will. I'll walk out that door, and you'll never see me again. I'll disappear from your life completely. You can go back to your normal world and forget this ever happened. But if you're honest, really honest, you'll admit that you don't want that. His voice was shaking now. That you've been falling for me too. That those Thursdays meant something to you. That when you dressed up and wore your good lipstick and smiled when I walked through the door, it wasn't just good customer service. She closed her eyes, more tears escaping. Because he was right and she hated it. Hated that she'd fallen for him. Hated that even knowing what he was, she still wanted him. Hated that her heart didn't care about logic or safety or any of the sensible reasons she should run. One night, he repeated softly. One honest night where you don't have to be the good girl and I don't have to be the dragon. Where we're just Kai and Amara, figuring out if this thing between us is real or if we've both been living in a fantasy. And after, her voice was barely audible. After, you decide. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheeks. If you want me gone, I'll go. I'll leave you alone forever and make sure no one in my world ever touches you. Or if you want to see where this goes, if you want to take the risk, then we figure it out together. She opened her eyes and found him staring at her with an intensity that stole her breath. There was fear there. Real fear. This dangerous, ruthless man was terrified she'd say no. Why should I trust you? She asked. You've been lying to me for 6 months. You shouldn't trust me. His honesty was brutal. I'm probably the last person in the world you should trust, but I'm the only person who's ever going to look at you like you're the only thing that matters. I'm the only person who'll love you like you're the air I breathe, and the reason my heart still beats. I'm the only person who'll burn the whole world down before I let anyone hurt you. That's not love, she said weakly. That's obsession. Maybe. His smile was sad. Or maybe when you've spent your whole life surrounded by darkness, you hold on to light with everything you have. Maybe when you've forgotten what it means to feel, you cling to the person who reminds you you're still alive. The rain was slowing outside. The old man in the corner booth had left at some point and she hadn't even noticed. It was just the two of them now in this empty diner with 6 months of tension and truth and want crackling between them. One night, he said again. His voice was a plea now, stripped of all pride. One honest night, where you stop being afraid, and I stop pretending I don't need you. And then you choose. Stay or go, trust me or walk away. But at least you'll know. At least we'll both know if this was real. And if it is real? She asked. If I stay, what then? Then I spend the rest of my life proving you didn't make a mistake. His forehead pressed harder against hers. I make sure you're safe and protected and cherished. I pay for your nursing school and support your dreams and give you everything you've ever wanted. Not because I'm buying you, but because you deserve it. And your world? The violence and the danger and all the things you do? I can't change what I am, Amara. He was honest about that at least. But I can keep you separate from it. Keep you safe. You'd be mine and everyone in my world would know that touching you means death. The possessiveness should have scared her. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in her chest. "This is insane," she whispered. "I know. I should say no. You should. But I'm not going to." The words escaped before she could stop them. "Because you're right. I have been falling, and I'm terrified and confused, and I don't trust you, and this is probably the biggest mistake of my life. But..." His voice was hopeful now. Desperate. "But I need to know." She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "I need to know if what I felt was real. If you're real. If any of this is worth the risk." The smile that broke across his face was beautiful and devastating, and so full of relief it made her heart clench. "One night," he promised. "One honest night. And then you decide our future." She nodded, unable to speak around the emotion clogging her throat, and as he leaned down to kiss her, slow and tender, and full of 6 months of longing, Amara realized she'd already decided. She was all in. God help her, she was all in. His lips touched hers, and the world stopped. It wasn't the wild, desperate kiss she'd imagined when she'd let herself fantasize about this moment late at night in her tiny apartment. It was soft and careful and achingly tender, like he was afraid she might break, like she was something precious he'd been waiting his whole life to hold. And something inside her shattered. Not broke. Shattered. Like a wall she'd been building around her heart for years suddenly crumbled into dust, and there was nothing left to protect her from the truth she'd been hiding from herself. She'd already fallen for him. Not tonight when he'd revealed who he was. Not during his confession with rain drumming on the roof and his hands gentle on her face. She'd fallen months ago, had been falling slowly, steadily, inevitably from the very first Thursday he'd walked through that door. The realization hit her so hard, she gasped against his mouth and he pulled back immediately, searching her face with worried eyes. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Did I hurt you?" "No." She shook her head, trying to catch her breath, trying to process the enormity of what she was feeling. "No. You didn't hurt me. I just realized something." "What?" His hands were still framing her face, thumbs stroking her cheeks like he couldn't stop touching her now that he'd started. "I've been lying to myself." The words tumbled out, raw and honest and terrifying. "This whole time I've been telling myself you were just a customer, just a kind man who tipped well, just a harmless crush that didn't mean anything." His expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between hope and fear. But that was never true, was it? She could feel tears building again, but these felt different. Cleaner somehow. Like they were washing away something old and scared. "I fell for you weeks ago. Maybe even that first night." She thought back to that moment. To the way her heart had skipped when he'd walked in. To how she'd noticed everything about him. The expensive suit. The careful eyes. The way he moved like he owned whatever space he occupied. She'd told herself it didn't mean anything, but she'd gone home that night and thought about him before she fell asleep. And then, the second Thursday. She'd watched the clock, counting down the minutes until 11:47. Had felt genuine disappointment when midnight came and went with no sign of him, followed by pure joy when he'd walked in at 11:52 and apologized for being late. Like her feelings had mattered. Like keeping her waiting had bothered him. "You remembered my schedule," she said quietly, memories flooding back. "The third week when I mentioned I had to work a double shift, you came in during the lunch rush too. Sat at that same counter for 20 minutes just to see me, even though the diner was packed and loud and nothing like our Thursday nights. I couldn't wait a whole week." His confession was simple, honest. "I needed to see you. And when my car broke down," her voice was shaking now, "I didn't even tell you how bad it was, but the next Thursday you left me $500. Said it was for excellent service, but we both knew that was a lie. I couldn't stand the thought of you taking the bus in the dark." Something fierce flashed in his eyes. "Couldn't stand thinking about you being unsafe. You bought me coffee." The memory made her chest tight. "That morning rush when I was covering someone's shift, and you saw me come in as a customer instead of the waitress. You bought my coffee and left before I could even thank you properly. I didn't want to intrude on your time off, but I saw you walk in and I couldn't just leave without making sure you got something." She was crying fully now. But these weren't sad tears. They were the tears that came when you finally stopped lying to yourself. When you finally admitted a truth you'd been too scared to face. "You've been taking care of me for months." The realization was overwhelming. All those tips that paid my rent. The way you'd stay later when the diner was empty so I wouldn't have to close alone. How you'd walk me to my car even though you never made a big deal about it. You were protecting me. cherishing me. Before I even knew your real name. Yes. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. From the first moment I saw you, Amara. From the very first moment. And I let you. She laughed through her tears. I told myself it was just good customer service to accept your help, that it would be rude to refuse your tips, that it didn't mean anything when I started looking forward to Thursdays more than any other day of the week. But it did mean something. Everything. The word broke out of her. It meant everything, and I was too scared to admit it because you were too good to be true. Too kind, too generous, too perfect. I kept waiting for the catch. And there was a catch. His voice was gentle. I'm a monster who's been obsessed with you. No. She put her hands over his, where they still cupped her face. That's not the catch. The catch is that I don't care. His eyes widened. That's what I just realized. She needed him to understand. When you told me who you were, what you do, I should have been horrified. Should have run. But all I could think about was how empty my Thursdays would be without you. How much it would hurt to never see you again. Amara, I spent my whole life being invisible. She continued, the words pouring out like a dam had broken. I'm a waitress in a cheap diner. People look through me, not at me. They see the uniform and the name tag and that's it. They don't see me. Don't care about my dreams or my bad days or what makes me smile. But you did. Her voice cracked. You saw me. Really saw me. You asked questions and listened to the answers. You remembered things I said weeks ago. You made me feel like I mattered. Like I was someone worth knowing. You do matter. His voice was fierce. You're the only thing that matters. And that's the real danger. Isn't it? The truth settled over her, like a weight and a relief all at once. Not your world or your enemies or the violence. The real danger is that you made me feel seen for the first time in my life, and now I can't imagine going back to being invisible. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding and tenderness and fierce possessiveness, all mixed together. You could never be invisible to me. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You're the brightest thing in my world, Amara. The only light in all the darkness. She pulled his hands away from her face but didn't let go. Just held them between hers, looking down at his fingers. Strong and scarred and capable of terrible things. But gentle when they touched her. Always so gentle. I've been alone for 3 years. The confession hurt, but it needed to be said. Since my mom died, it's just been me. Working and surviving, and trying not to think too hard about how lonely I was. How much I missed having someone who cared if I made it home safe. Someone who celebrated my good days and held me through the bad ones. I know. He squeezed her hands. You told me about your mother. About how she used to make you pancakes when you were sad. About how you still can't eat strawberries because they remind you of her. She told him that on a random Thursday months ago when a customer had left strawberries on their plate and she'd had to excuse herself to cry in the walk-in freezer. He'd still been there when she came back out with red eyes and he hadn't asked questions. Just listened when she needed to talk. You remembered, she whispered. I remember everything you've ever told me. His voice was soft. Every story, every detail. Every small piece of yourself you shared. I hold all of it here. He placed one of her hands over his heart and she could feel it beating hard and fast beneath her palm. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without even realizing it, I started sharing pieces of myself too. Her throat was tight. I told you things I haven't told anyone. About wanting to be a nurse. About being scared I'd never be more than a waitress. About my student debt and my broken dreams and how tired I am of just surviving instead of living. And I wanted to fix all of it. The intensity in his eyes made her shiver. Wanted to give you everything you've ever dreamed of. Not because I was trying to buy you, but because the thought of you struggling, of you being tired and scared and alone, was unbearable. Why? She needed to hear him say it again. Why do you care so much? Because love isn't careful or logical or safe. His voice roughened with emotion. Because when you fall for someone, really fall, their pain becomes your pain. Their dreams become your dreams. Their happiness becomes the only thing that matters. You love me. She said it like she was testing the words. Trying to believe them. More than I've ever loved anything. He lifted their joined hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles softly. More than power or money or my own life. You became my everything, Amara. And I can't take it back now. Can't unfeel it. Even if you walk away, even if you never want to see me again, I'll love you until the day I die. The declaration should have felt like pressure. like something too big and too fast. Instead, it felt like coming home. I was so scared, she admitted. When you told me who you were. Not scared of you. Scared of this. Of how much I feel. Of admitting that my heart made a choice months ago that my head is only catching up to now. And what choice was that? You. The word was simple, but it contained everything. My heart chose you, Kai Liang. Chose you when I thought you were just a kind customer and keeps choosing you now that I know you're so much more complicated than that. She took a shaky breath. The real twist isn't that you're a criminal. It's that I don't care. That all I can think about is how much I've missed you between Thursdays. How complete I feel when you're here. How much I've been craving exactly this. Someone who sees me and cherishes me and makes me feel like I'm worth all the care you've been pouring into me. His eyes were shining now, bright with unshed tears of his own. I've been yours for months, she finished. I just didn't have the courage to admit it until tonight. And now? His voice was barely a whisper. Now that you know everything, now I'm terrified. She let herself be honest. Terrified of your world and what it means and whether I'm strong enough for this. But I'm more terrified of losing you. Of going back to Thursday nights without you. Of never feeling this seen and cherished again. She stepped closer, closing the last bit of distance between them. So yes, one night. One honest night, where we stop pretending and stop hiding. But Kai? Her voice strengthened. I already know what I'm going to choose at the end of it. What? Hope and fear warred in his expression. You. Always you. Because my heart decided months ago, and nothing you've told me tonight has changed that. If anything, knowing the real you, the complicated, dangerous, broken parts, just makes me love you more. Love. She'd said it. Finally said it out loud. And watching his face transform, watching the hardness melt away into pure joy and relief and overwhelming emotion, Amara realized the truth. The danger had never been his world. The danger was how much she needed this feeling. Needed to be seen and wanted and cherished like she was precious. Needed him like she'd never needed anything in her life. And God help her, she was diving in headfirst. They stood there in the empty diner with the rain finally stopping outside and the world feeling new and fragile and full of possibility. His hands were still holding hers and she was still crying, and neither of them seemed able to look away from each other. This was the moment. The line she couldn't uncross once she stepped over it. Behind her was everything safe and familiar. Her simple life with its simple problems. Working at the diner, saving money slowly, dreaming small dreams that felt achievable. Being alone but protected. Being invisible but unhurt. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it was safe. In front of her was him, Kai Liang, with his dangerous world and his fierce love and his promise to cherish her like she was the center of his universe. Complicated and risky and probably impossible. Everything she'd spent her life avoiding. But as she stood there, looking into his eyes, feeling his heartbeat under her palm, remembering 6 months of Thursdays that had slowly stitched themselves into her soul, she realized something important. Safe wasn't the same as happy. And she'd been choosing safe for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to want something more. Take me home. The words came out steady and sure. No more waiting. No more pretending. Take me home with you. Kai. Are you sure? He searched her face desperately. Because once we leave here, once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, and the whole world will have to accept it. I'm sure. And she was. Terrified but sure. This is insane and reckless and probably the worst decision I've ever made. But I'm sure. Something blazed in his eyes. Something fierce and possessive and tender all at once. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. His voice shook with the weight of the promise. I'm going to protect you and cherish you and love you so thoroughly you'll forget what loneliness feels like. I'm holding you to that. She tried to smile through her tears. Good. He pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her like he was afraid she might disappear. Because I need you to understand, Amara. From this moment on, you're not just Amara Johnson, waitress at a diner. You're my Amara. And that means something in my world. What does it mean? It means you're untouchable. It means anyone who even thinks about hurting you will answer to me personally. It means you'll never want for anything. Never be alone. Never have to carry your burdens by yourself again. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. Her voice was muffled against his chest. It's not responsibility. His lips pressed against her hair. It's devotion. The word settled into her heart and made itself at home. I need to lock up. She pulled back reluctantly, suddenly aware that they were still standing in the diner with the lights on and the door unlocked. Let me close everything down properly. I'll wait. He released her, but his eyes tracked her every movement as she went through her closing routine. She locked the register like she'd done 1,000 times before, turned off the coffee maker that had been brewing since noon, wiped down the counter one last time, her cloth passing over the spot where his black card with the golden dragon still lay. She picked it up, felt the weight of it, what it represented, who he was. Her hands should have been shaking. She should have been second-guessing every choice that led to this moment. Instead, she felt calm, clear, like she'd been walking through fog for 3 years, and suddenly the air was crisp, and she could finally see where she was going. She turned off the main lights, leaving just the small lamp by the door, grabbed her purse from behind the counter, her coat from the hook by the kitchen, the jar labeled nursing school that sat on the shelf above the coffee maker, heavy with his tips and her dreams. Everything she was taking with her fit in her hands. Everything she was leaving behind was already packed in her heart. Ready? He asked when she came back to where he waited by the door. She looked around the diner one last time. This place had been her life for 2 years. Every table held a memory. Every stain on the floor had a story. She'd cried here and laughed here and survived here during the worst years of her life. But she'd also met him here. And somehow, that made every difficult shift, every rude customer, every moment of exhaustion worth it. Because it had led to Thursday nights. Led to him. Led to this moment where she was choosing something more. Ready, she meant it. He held out his hand and she took it without hesitation. His fingers laced through hers and squeezed gently, like he was sealing a promise neither of them had words for yet. They walked out together into the night that was fresh and clean after the rain. His car was parked in the empty lot, sleek and black and expensive, just like everything else about him. He opened the passenger door for her and she slid into leather seats that smelled like him. That expensive cologne mixed with something else. Something uniquely Kai. He got in beside her but didn't start the engine immediately. Just sat there in the quiet darkness with both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. What's wrong? She touched his arm gently. Nothing's wrong. He turned to look at her, and there was something raw in his expression. Something vulnerable. Everything's right for the first time in years, and I'm terrified. I'm going to wake up and find out this was a dream. I'm real. She guided his hand to her face, pressed his palm against her cheek. This is real. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you choose someone like me? Because underneath all the danger and the ruthlessness and the things you've done, there's a man who's been gentle with me from the very first moment. She turned her head to kiss his palm. Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you cared about my dreams and my struggles and my bad days. Because you made me feel precious. You are precious. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. You're everything good in my dark world, Amara. And I'm going to spend every day proving I deserve this chance you're giving me. You don't have to prove anything. She meant it. Just love me. Just be the man you've been every Thursday. That's enough. It's not enough, but it's what I have to offer. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. That and everything else I own. My protection, my loyalty, my heart. It's all yours now. The enormity of it settled over her. This wasn't just a romance or a relationship. This was a complete transformation of her entire life. Tomorrow she'd wake up in his world. Tomorrow she'd be the woman who belonged to Kai Liang. Tomorrow everything would be different. But looking at him in the darkness with his hand still on her face and love shining in his eyes, different didn't feel scary anymore. It felt like coming home. Take me to your place. Her voice was steady. Show me your world. Let me see where you go when you're not sitting in my diner, pretending to be someone else. Our diner. He corrected gently as he started the engine. It was always ours, Amara. From that very first night. He pulled out of the parking lot and she watched the diner disappear in the side mirror. Watched her old life get smaller and smaller until it was just a glowing dot in the distance. And she didn't feel sad. Didn't feel regret. She felt free. They drove through the city in comfortable silence, his hand finding hers on the center console and holding tight. The streets got nicer as they went. Buildings getting taller and more elegant. Lights getting brighter. This was a part of the city she'd only seen from far away. The part where people like her didn't belong. But she belonged now. Because he wanted her here. He pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that looked like it touched the sky. parked in a spot marked private that made her stomach flutter with nerves. This was real. This was happening. She was really here. Come on. He came around to open her door, helped her out with a hand on her waist that felt possessive and right. Let me show you home. They took an elevator that required a key card to operate. It shot upwards so fast, her ears popped, and she grabbed his arm for balance. He steadied her immediately, pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his strength. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out below them like a blanket of lights. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials, the kind of things she'd only seen in magazines. Art hung on the walls that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Everything was perfect and pristine and absolutely nothing like the warm, lived-in spaces she was used to. This is where you live? She couldn't keep the awe out of her voice. This is where I exist, he corrected, watching her take it all in. But it's never felt like home. Just a place to sleep between obligations. And now? Now, you're here. His arms came around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. So maybe it can finally feel like more than just a place. She turned in his arms to face him, wrapped her own arms around his neck, and looked up into eyes that had seen terrible things but were looking at her with such tenderness it made her chest ache. I'm scared. The admission felt important, necessary. I'm scared of your world, and scared of losing myself, and scared that I won't be strong enough for this. I'm scared too. His honesty matched hers. Scared I'll fail you. Scared my world will hurt you. Scared you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. Then we'll be scared together. She pulled his face down to hers. And we'll figure it out as we go. Together. He said the word like a vow. Like a prayer. Together. She agreed. And when he kissed her this time, it wasn't gentle or careful. It was claiming and desperate and full of 6 months of want finally unleashed. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and hope and love into the connection between them. This was it. The point of no return. She'd crossed the line. She'd chosen him over safety, over simplicity, over everything that made sense. And as he lifted her in his arms and carried her deeper into his home, into his world, into a future that was terrifying and thrilling and completely unknown, Amara Johnson realized something important. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in her life, someone saw her completely and loved her anyway. For the first time ever, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. In his arms, in his heart, in his life. And whatever came next, whatever dangers or challenges his world brought, they would face it together. Because she'd chosen him. And he'd already chosen her months ago. And that was enough. That was everything.